discuss tomorrow. In today's class, we are going to see something called as what exactly a computer system is. What exactly do you mean by IO devices? How a memory part works? What do you mean by how your devices communicate with each other? What do you mean by cache memory? What do you mean by main memory? And basically how your CPU tries to fetch the instructions and so on. So this is basics of computers that everyone, what is a booting process and so on. So these based on the basics of computers, sometimes questions are asked. So that's the reason the day 1 is divided into computer fundamentals. Day 2 and day 3 is based on data communication and networking. One more time, I'm saying this is a theoretical conceptual subject. If you listen then to these concepts, then it will be easy for you to basically go ahead with the solving of MCQ type of questions. Straightforward questions are asked, nothing to worry. Right now, per day, there are 2 lectures every day for your batch. Morning 8 to 11 to 7, you can post the computer fundamentals now. So first of all, everyone is aware about what do you mean by computer and what are the different parts within a computer. So we can say any computer which is having something called as CPU, called as central processing unit, which have something called as disk controllers, and which has something called as USB controller. Right? USB stands for basically a universal serial bus, and then you have a graphics adapter. Right now, when you talk about a computer system, this computer system consists of major components as this. Right? CPU is basically called as processor of the system that everyone is aware about. Disk controllers are basically used to convert or basically used to have a communication between your disk drives. For example, if you talk about disks, you have hard disk, you have external hard drive, you have pen drive, you have a major internal and external disks, right? Disks are for the storage areas, and that is basically called as disk. But when you talk about disk, then you need to perform some operations onto the disk, and for that we have something called as controller. You can call these controllers as drivers also. For example, if you wish to let us say install keyboard or printer or mouse or scanner, in that case you can have the different drivers, right? What are drivers? These are the basic, you can say, some softwares which need to be installed on your machine so that your machine can understand, okay, I need to connect with this device. नॉर्मली जब आप USB के साथ माउस एंड कीबोर्ड कनेक्ट करते हो तो आपको ड्राइवर्स इंस्टॉल नहीं करने पड़ते हैं because those are already there. But when you install some external devices like printer, you have scanner, you install some gaming drivers and so on. So for that, you need some external drivers to be installed. What are drivers? They are some software applications which need to be installed on your machine so that there can be a smooth functionality between your computer and the printer. So that's why you have, so we can say that this is type of a controller which tries to control the devices. The devices can be of input and output both. Similarly, if you wish to go work with monitor, monitor is basically your output screen, and which is having something called as graphics adapter. Before you can say without this graphics, you will not be able to see the contents on your monitor, and that is called as graphics adapter. And for performing some operations, for storing some data, for basically do some execution part, we need some kind of storage area, and that is nothing but memory, which is also called as RAM, called as random access memory, which is called as main memory of your system. So the main memory is basically the primary memory which is available in any computer system. So we will see in today's class what exactly a CPU does. What do you mean by input and output devices? How do they communicate with each other? And what do you mean by a memory part? And we will see something called as memory hierarchy too. So this is about the generalized diagram for a computer system, right? Now, next is what is computer? Everyone is aware, but for your reference, I have included some definition part. It's a machine which can do different tasks for you and which is user friendly, and obviously it's very effectively. And it was basically in 1940s, computer were having 5 major components. One is input devices via which you can give some input, maybe keyboard, mouse, you can say scanner is also one input device. And when you talk about output device, then you can go for display, you can go for printer and so on. So these are the output devices via which you can see the output, right? Next come as a storage devices. So what are the storage devices? They are basically used for storing some data. So maybe you want to store some data for a temporary purpose. You want to store data for permanent purpose. So for that, and you want a small amount of data to be stored, you want a big amount of data to be stored. So for that, we have something called as storage devices, where we will say that a volatile memory devices, maybe RAM, DRAM, SRAM, and so on. And there is permanent storage device, which is magnetic field, tapes, or you can say optical drives, flash disk, your pen drive, your hard disk drive. All these are permanent storage device. When you talk about volatile, it means when the power goes off, the contents will get lost. Means, for example, if you're considering about your RAM, that is basically a volatile memory. वोलेटाइल मींस जैसे ही पावर गया तो आपके रैम के कंटेंट्स आपके मशीन पे रैम में नहीं रहते हैं, and that is called as once the power is off, the contents get lost into volatile. But if I want to keep some data permanently, आपके हार्ड डिस्क में जैसे डेटा आप रीस्टार्ट या शटडाउन करने के पहले रहेगा वैसे के वैसे रहते हैं, that means that is called as non-volatile memory, called as permanent storage devices. Yes, Pawan, it is a temporary memory, which is called as volatile memory. Right? Now, in your system, you have computer system where I have memory, devices called as input-output devices, processors basically control and data path, right? When you talk about data path, it is also called as arithmetic logic unit. Ultimately, when you are trying to perform any operation, maybe any arithmetic operation, logical operations, so all these operations are done by your ALU. ALU stands for arithmetic and logical unit. Also, it is controlled by some control units, and that together is called as processor. So when I'm talking about processor, it's nothing but your CPU, which consists of some control lines. Maybe I want to read the data, maybe I want to write the data, I wish to copy the data, I wish to paste the data, maybe I want to delete that data. So these all are different operations that I want to perform. So these operations can be performed with the help of control block, and then data path is basically used, or you can say for performing arithmetic and logical units. Initially, there were 5 major parts, but now they have added one more component, which is network. So network is called, in your system, there is one card which is called as NIC card, that is network interface card. And that is basically helpful for us to get connected over the internet. And these are the some essential components of any computer system, right? So this is just the basic definition of computer. And when you talk about computer, it has hardware. So hardware basically are the things that you can see, that you can visualize in your system. For example, CPU, you can see RAM, you can see IO devices, you can see communication lines, you can see NIC card, you can see the processor, you can see motherboard. So all these are called as hardware devices. But when you talk about software applications, then that is called as operating system. So what is operating system? Which you cannot see, but it is a program which is written. And why do we need operating system? Because I want to coordinate and control different operations which I'm performing on my machine. Because hardware devices are the physical devices. They cannot perform operations directly. We need to control and we need to coordinate among the hardware devices and the software devices. So for that, we need something called as OS. So there are different types of operating systems. Maybe you have heard Windows operating system, you have Linux, you have Mac, you have Ubuntu, and so on and so forth. So there are different operating systems which are available, and you can go for operating system for controlling and coordinating among the hardware and the software. We will see in more detail about operating system in the subject called as OS only. So for after finishing your data communication network and computer fundamentals, probably we will have operating system as the next subject for next 4 days. This is how the flow will be. System and application programs. Now you have, for example, you have installed VS Code, you have installed GCC compiler, you have web browsers, you have some databases in your system, you have some music players. So what all these are? These are basically the programs called as system and application programs. कंपाइलर आपके सिस्टम लेवल पे काम करता है, आपको मेमोरी एलोकेशन देगा, डी एलोकेट करेगा, OS को रिक्वेस्ट करेगा, and so on and so forth. So we can say those are system level programs. For example, when you are using printer, you need to install drivers for that. So what are drivers? They are system level programs. But when you are using some applications, like you use Word, you use Excel, you use Chrome browser, you use Acrobat Reader, and maybe you use any notepad, paint, and so on. All these are called as application programs, which these applications helps us to develop different applications or the programs based on our requirement. And when you talk about users, so we are the users. One machine can be used by a person, can be used by another machines, or maybe by other computers. So these can be the users for basically any computer system, right? So this is basically the introduction about what exactly a computer is and what do you mean by input, output, processing, and secondary storage. This is a generalized diagram for any computer system. We can say that these are the parts of computer system where I have some input devices. For example, I'm inserting some text through keyboard. They get processed first, right? By whom? By the central processing unit, which is called as CPU. That CPU will perform some instruction execution, and CPU will check what operation I have to perform. And later on, after processing, if it requires some storage area, it holds that data into its main memory. That is a temporary storage. Once that operation is performed, then I can print, or I can say I wish to print that data on the output. So that is nothing but on the monitor that you can see the output on the devices. So I give the input from input device, I get the output on the output devices with the help of, or with the processing of, central processing unit and memory. Also in between, you save the file, right? You retrieve some file, right? And you can just delete some files, and those are basically stored onto the secondary storage. So hard disk you can consider as a secondary storage. RAM you can consider as a primary storage. Why it is primary? Because it is basically the first used whenever you want to go for any operations to be performed. So these are the basics of computer or parts of computer systems, right? So everyone, I hope these definitions are aware about, these definitions are known to you, but as an introductory part, I have to cover, right? Nilesh is asking, did you provide handwritten notes for theory lecture or recorded session? Nilesh, theory notes in the sense, सेक्शन बी का बुक आपको कोरियर किया जाएगा, बाकी जो पीपीटी स्लाइड्स हैं, प्रोग्राम्स है, डायग्राम्स है, everything will be shared. For example, this is day 1 of computer fundamental. This PPT will be shared with you and along with the recorded session. Okay, Nilesh? Right. So have you all, are you all there and are you understanding? This is just basic definition of computer, and I hope you all are awake. I can understand the difference between the theories of lecture and the programs, but you have both the subjects, so you have to concentrate, right? Good. So let us start with the concept. What actually happens when you start your machine? And that process is called as booting process. Now, when you talk about booting process, initially, when I say I have a machine, right? Maybe a laptop or a desktop, correct? That when I have any specific hardware available with me, in that case, वो automatically start हो जाता है क्या? Yes or no? No, it doesn't get automatically started, right? So when I say I am switching my machine on, I'm switching or power on करती हूँ laptop का या फिर device, any device. In that case, what actually happens such that your machine gets started and your operating system gets loaded, right? So what is booting? Booting is basically loading the operating system into the main memory. What is booting? In your machine, there can be one operating system, Windows operating system maybe. There can be multiple operating systems, and there can be, you can say there are n number of operating systems can be available on one single machine also, right? This को हम dual boot बोलते हैं, right? So what actually it means, booting is basically wherever whatever is your operating system is there, उसको main memory में load करना है, and that is called as booting process. Initially, your hardware does not know where the operating system resides and how to load it. Your OS does not know about it. So what does it do? When you talk about booting, there is one important program which is called as bootstrap program. What does it do? It's the initial or it's the first program that is used to run the system. Locating and loading the operating system kernel in the main memory is called as booting process. Now, what is kernel? Kernel is a core part of operating system. Means, as we say, as a human being, the heart is the core part of human body. Without heart, a human cannot be alive, right? So without a kernel, your operating system cannot work, right? So if you talk about operating system, the core part of operating system is the kernel. तो जब मैं बूटिंग की बात करती हूँ, बूटिंग मतलब मुझे मेरे मशीन को स्टार्ट करना है, स्टार्ट करने के बाद आई हैव टू लोड माय ऑपरेटिंग सिस्टम कर्नल इन द मेन मेमोरी. Because until and unless your data is not there in the main memory, then your data will basically, or your program, your system cannot process the data. So when I'm saying I'm just performing a Word document, right? I have a Word document, I'm working on it. Maybe I'm working on Excel sheet, maybe I'm working on Acrobat, maybe I'm working on VS Code. So in that case, what actually it means that I have all these applications available in my RAM right now, which are basically getting executed. बाकी के सारे programs कहाँ पे है? मेरे hard disk में रहते हैं. तो जब तक मैं कोई भी program को main memory में नहीं लेके आती हूँ, तब तक that program cannot get executed. So if I say anything which is in execution mode is available in the main memory. This in detail we will see in OS concept. But when I talk about booting, it means I have to load the operating system in the main memory. Now, where it is stored? It is stored inside the ROM. Now, what it does, it basically initializes the system from the CPU registers, maybe device controllers or the memory controllers. Now, when you start your machine, in that case, the first program that helps me to run the system is a bootstrap program. Now, what is bootstrap? Bootstrap is the smallest program which is having very less kind of memory requirement, right? Now, have you ever heard about something called as कभी-कभी आपका system start नहीं होता है, right? And suppose in that case, you have taken your machine, you have taken your laptop to the someone who repairs it, right? And that person says कि your machine is not getting booted properly. Have you heard these terminologies? Our system is not getting booted, right? So what that person do, that person will try to, sometimes have you heard the terminology, I will try to boot your machine from my pen drive, or I will try to boot your machine from the disk. Have you ever heard these terminology? फिर वो कोई तो एक CD रहती है उसके पास, and then that CD it puts into your machine and try to start your machine. Yeah, sometimes that person tries to put a pen drive, and then that person tries to put a pen drive and then tries to start your machine. What actually that means? It means that that person have saved a bootstrap program in its disk, right? Sometimes when I start my machine, the first program that run into the system is a bootstrap program. So in your motherboard, there are some capacitors, some storage areas, minute storage device, जहां पे आपका bootstrap program का program लिखा हुआ है. जैसे ही पावर जाता है उस पे मदरबोर्ड पे, तो दैट बेसिकली कैपेसिटर्स और मे बी समथिंग gets charged, and then it basically try to load or start your bootstrap program. And if your bootstrap program is not getting found properly, तो आपका machine start नहीं होता है. So what that person, external person will do, that person is having a bootstrap program loaded into the hard drive, or maybe into the external disk, maybe into the pen drive, right? And when that machine when I put that CD into that machine, in that laptop, and when I start that laptop, at that moment, instead of loading a bootstrap program from your device, it will select that please select bootstrap program from the external DVD or CD or something like that. Are you understanding the scenario? तो machine को start करने के लिए what we need a bootstrap program, right? So if your bootstrap program is available, मतलब क्या हो जाएगा, combination क्या होगा कि first task is search for bootstrap program. This bootstrap program is normally available into ROM, that is a permanent storage, right? Now, normally it's available, you can say, in the hard disk or ROM. Now, if you talk about hard disk, then we can say this is a bootable device. If your bootstrap program is available in hard disk, then I will say hard disk is a bootable device. If your bootstrap program is available in CD or DVD, तो मैं उसको बोलती हूँ bootable CD और bootable DVD. जो भी डिवाइस के अंदर आपका bootstrap प्रोग्राम रहता है, उस डिवाइस को हम बोलते हैं bootable device. Have you understood, everyone? Right. Now, your disk looks like this, right? Which has some concentric circles, correct? Now, these concentric circles are, let us say, looking like this. This is a disk structure. Assume this disk is having different tracks, right? This disk structure is having different tracks, right? So I will say this is my, let us say, track number 1, right? This is track number 2, this is track number 3, and so on, right? So this is track number 3 and so on. So when I try to divide this is divided into number of sectors. This is sector 1, right? Maybe this is sector 2, then this is sector 3, this is sector 4, this is sector 5. The disk is divided into number of tracks. The disk is divided into number of sectors, out of which the first track or the first 0th sector, right? In this, your bootstrap program is available, right? At this location. right? Suppose my bootstrap program is stored on sector 0, right? So that sector is called as boot sector. Have you understood? The reason is, in your hard disk, sector number 0 is reserved for your bootstrap program. Once your machine gets started, the system when the power reaches to your motherboard, it searches for bootstrap program. If the where the bootstrap program is available, it is in the bootable device. So for example, for my system, my bootstrap program is perfectly fine, and that's why it is available in the hard disk, and it is available in the hard disk, so it will get it from there, and that's why I will call that hard disk is a bootable device. Then what is boot sector? Inside the hard disk, the disk is divided into number of tracks, disk is divided into number of sectors. So sector number 0 mein, there is a bootstrap program which is stored. So the sector which consists of or which is having a bootstrap program is called as boot sector. Have you understood the difference between what is bootstrap program and what is boot sector and what is bootable device? Are these three terminologies are clear to you all? A bootable device. So if any storage device partition contains one special program called as bootstrap program in its first sector, then it is called as a boot sector, and such device or partition is called as. Yes, am I audible now?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So let me just share the screen. All right. Yes. Now I'll repeat once. So if any storage device, जैसे मैंने कहा कि hard disk is my storage device, which is called which is having one special program which is called as bootstrap program. What it is called as? It is called as bootstrap program. If it is available in the first sector, then that is called as a boot sector, right? And if you talk about boot sector, it is basically the sector जहां पे मेरा bootstrap program store किया हुआ है. Then such device is called as bootable device, right? So I hope you have understood what is a bootstrap program, what is bootable device, and what is boot sector. Everyone, have you understood up to this point? Right. Now, so अब पहला टास्क क्या है कि मुझे बूटस्ट्रैप प्रोग्राम सर्च करना है. तो बूटस्ट्रैप प्रोग्राम तो मुझे पता है कि yes it is there in the sector number 0 or sector number 1, or we normally say it's a first sector, right? Now this is the initial program to run the system, and what actually it does, bootstrap program locates and load OS kernel in the main memory. That is the job of bootstrap program. So that is the first thing that everyone must aware about, what exactly a booting process ka step 1. Booting process is generally divided into two categories. One is machine boot and second is system boot. Locate and load means पहले वो bootstrap program, it will be the initial program. Locating and loading means what? For example, if you say I have 2 operating systems on my machine, I have Windows and maybe I have Ubuntu on one single machine. तो obviously Windows का bootstrap अलग रहेगा, obviously Ubuntu का भी bootstrap अलग रहेगा, right? Suppose bootstrap भी रहा बूटस्ट्रैप प्रोग्राम भी लोड हुआ, लेकिन विंडोज एंड उबंटू का पूरा ऑपरेटिंग सिस्टम ही अलग अलग है. दैट इज ऑब्वियस, राइट? पहले वो लोकेट करेगा कि विच ऑपरेटिंग सिस्टम आई नीड टू लोड ऑन माई मशीन. एंड इफ आई एम सिलेक्टिंग विंडोज, तो वो विंडोज का ही कर्नल मेरे मेन मेमोरी में लेके आएगा. कर्नल इज अ मेन कोर पार्ट ऑफ योर ऑपरेटिंग सिस्टम. कर्नल कहां पे लेके आएगा? इनसाइड योर मेन मेमोरी. बट सपोज अब मैं बोलती हूं नो, आई वांट टू लोड दिस ubuntu in my machine, or I want to start with work with ubuntu. In that case, it will locate that ubuntu, it will locate the kernel of that ubuntu, and it will load it into main memory. Did you all understand, everyone? This is called as locating and loading. So a system program booting consists of two things: machine boot and system boot. For example, let us read this. It's self-explanatory, but let us read it. When we switch on the power, the current gets passed to the motherboard, right? A program gets invoked, which is called as BIOS. BIOS stands for Basic Input Output System, which exists in the ROM in the main in the motherboard. BIOS is a macro program. It's the smallest program, which is smaller in size and can be stored into the memory with its possible set of input values. Means it is so small that you can store it into capacitors or something like that. So the first step of BIOS is power on self test. That is called as post. What does it checks? It checks whether all the devices are basically connected properly or not. Sometimes your hardware, your internal hardware is not working. Sometimes it gives you error, no, I cannot, the machine cannot be started because keyboard is not working, yeah, for your monitor is not working. So that, or maybe some drivers are not yet installed correctly, some drivers have been corrupted. So all these are nothing but some kind of tests which are done, in which you can say in which section called as post, right? So post stands for power on self test. Under post, BIOS are basically checks whether all the peripherals are connected properly or not, and if they are in the working status. Peripherals basically can be anything. It can be your motherboard, it can be your hard disk, it can be your keyboard, it can be your, you can say, monitor, and so on. If all the devices are connected properly, if all the drivers are installed properly, then that job is taken care by post. Once the post is done, it executes a bootstrap loader. The loader searches for available bootable devices. For example, if you talk about bootable device, by default, it is, let us say, hard disk. So by default, it selects the hard disk. But sometimes if you try to boot your system from CD, boot your system from pen drive, in that case, you have to select that option. Okay, no, I do not want to go for normal hard disk drive as a bootable device. I want to go with the device which is externally connected, maybe a pen drive, maybe a DVD, and you have to select that option, right? So that bootstrap loader searches for available bootable device, right? And whatever bootable device we select, in that case, that device will be considered for locating your bootstrap program. If this is about step number 1. What is step 2? Step 2 says system boot. When you talk about system boot, if the hard disk drive gets selected, then it contains multiple operating systems and which have OS installed on it. Then bootloader program gets executed. The bootloader displays list of operating system installed on your machine, so that user can select one option And once the user select the number operating system, then उस operating system का bootstrap program locates into the kernel and loaded into the main memory. That is called as system boot. Have you ever observed if you have multiple number of OS installed on your machine, then आपको options आते हैं कि whether you want to go for Ubuntu, whether you want to go for Windows and so on. Have you ever observed when you start your machine? So who does that? That is done by your bootstrap loader. After what? After your BIOS gets selected. So BIOS क्या है? It is basic input output system, which is a very minute program, which is basically used for checking whether your devices are correct or not. Post होता है. Post is power on self test. Once it is done, then comes the bootstrap loader. What does your bootstrap loader does? ये check करता है कि मुझे bootstrap program कहाँ पे मिलेगा. Whether I will get it from the hard disk, whether I will get it from pen drive, whether I will get it from CD and so on. Whatever device I will mention that this is my bootable device, that is basically called as bootstrap loader, or bootstrap loader searches that. Once the bootstrap loader sees that, okay, hard disk is my bootable device, then what? Then it again checks, do I have only one operating system or multiple operating system? If you have one operating system, वो automatically load हो जाता है, start हो जाता है. But if you have multiple OS, it gives you options which OS you have to go for, and then you select that OS. उसी OS का kernel it takes into the main memory. Once the kernel is loaded into the main memory, then only your operating system starts working and your system gets started properly. This complete process is called as booting process. Is it fine? What is kernel? Kernel is a core part of your OS, right? Sajjan, as you have said, it's more theory. As I've already mentioned, this is a theoretical subject. This is going to be in the same way, right? The reason is few questions are asked on the theory part as well. ऐसा नहीं है कि सारे programs ही आते हैं आपके CCAT में. So you should be aware about both the topics called as theory as well as the programs, right? Which peripheral devices are included for post? Pawan, can you see all the peripheral devices you can consider and their working status? All the basic input output devices, maybe your monitor, maybe your keyboard, maybe your disk drives, maybe your any other devices which are installed on your machine. So everything is checked whether they are connected properly and so on. Okay. Right. Does this mean the system boot happen only if we have multiple OS? No, system booting happens every time. The bootloader checks. Bootloader checks, Tushar, whether you have multiple OSs or not. So accordingly, it gives you an option which OS you want to go for, and accordingly you will select that first option or the second option. उसी का ही kernel वो load करके आपको main में लाके देता है. All right. Got it. Good. But one external device means basically, for example, if your printer is installed and that is nothing but आपके system में drivers are already installed है, तो फिर वो उसके drivers check करेगा. That's it. Whether you have connected printer or not. All right. So hope you all have understood the meaning of booting process. Post BIOS executes the bootloader. Yes. After post BIOS, it executes a bootloader. Can you see, Shrikant? I've written clearly. The bootstrap loader searches for available bootable devices and select any one as per the priorities. तो जब भी आपने अगर आपका सिस्टम कभी खराब हुआ रहेगा तो फिर आपने अगर बाहर लेके गए या किसी को रिपेयर के लिए दिया तो that person generally presses F10 और F11 to enter into the BIOS. BIOS में ब्लू कलर का एक स्क्रीन आता है जहां पे that gives you the priority list कि whether you want to go for bootable devices hard disk or whether you want to go for CD or DVD or pen drive. तो बाय डिफॉल्ट इट इज अ बूटेबल डिवाइस इज सिलेक्टेड एज हार्ड डिस्क, बट अगर आपका हार्ड डिस्क में ही कुछ प्रॉब्लम रहेगा तो फिर वो उसको बूटस्ट्रैप लोडर आपका वो सेकंड वाला ऑप्शन सेलेक्ट करता है, मे बी योर डीवीडी और सीडी और पेन ड्राइव एंड सो ऑन, तो आपका मशीन वो ट्राई करता है वहां से बूटस्ट्रैप लोडर का। ओके, so that is how your machine boot and system boot works, right? So this is basically the booting process and about how what happens actually when your system starts, right? Now, as far as your system is concerned, computer is concerned, so I have explained the meaning of booting. Now we will proceed ahead something called as fundamentals of computers in more detail, where we will see what exactly a CPU is, how CPU tries to communicate, what are the IO devices, what do you mean by RAM, that is random access memory, what do you mean by memory, and so on, right? It's a system concept which integrates the software and the hardware to specify the design of computing system. That is basically how they are connected and how do they communicate with each other. That is called as computer system. And we will see in detail about what all these IO devices and how do they communicate or how do they are integrated with each other, right? Let us start with the first category called as CPU. Now, when you talk about CPU, CPU stands for Central Processing Unit. The CPU is having some memory registers, maybe register 0, register 1, register 2, register 3. These are basically the temporary storage areas where your CPU stores the data for performing some operations. So all the intermediate operations which are performed, those are basically can be stored within your CPU registers, right? So you can say inside your processor, there are some storage areas which are used, which are temporary areas, and those are called as CPU registers, right? Inside your CPU, there is something called as arithmetic and logical unit, which is used for basically performing arithmetic and logical operations on values which are stored onto the registers. So पहले registers में data store करेगा मेरा CPU and after that it will perform some ALU operations. Now, whether to read the data, whether to write the data, whether to fetch the data, maybe I wish to delete data, I want to move the data, and so on and so forth. There can be different number of operations that I want to perform through the CPU, through the processor. Then for that, we have something called as control state. Control state is basically used for controlling the operations that you wish to perform on some data, right? Now, suppose I'm saying I'm working with, you can say, I'm working on some code which is written in processor, microprocessor. Let us say I'm writing one start instruction, assume, and later on I'm saying add a comma b, maybe I'm saying then subtract a comma b, maybe I'm performing move operation, maybe I'm saying go to step number, go to some, let us say L1, let us say I'm writing L1, and let us say I'm performing add a comma b one more time, and I'm saying stop. Can I say all these are nothing but some kind of instructions which I have given in assembly level language? Yes, of course. So in this case, I will say this is my first instruction, which is nothing but start. This is my second instruction. This is my third. This is fourth instruction, and so on and so forth. Now, जो instruction currently मैं execute कर रही हूँ, that instruction is stored into instruction register. So the current instruction which is getting executed is called as current instruction. So that is to be stored into one register which is called as instruction register. So what is instruction register? It is used to hold the current instruction. What is instruction pointer? Every instruction is given a memory location. Maybe I'm saying 9,000 is the starting location. Maybe 9,004 पे मैंने ये instruction रखा, 9,005 पे ये this instruction is there, and so on and so forth. Every instruction is given a proper address, and this address is to be stored into some register which is called as instruction pointer register, which is called as IP register. So there are two specific registers. One is IR called as instruction register, another is IP called as instruction pointer register. IR is used to hold the current instruction. IP is used to hold the address of current instruction inside the RAM. Have you all understood up to this point what is CPU and what are the major parts within CPU? All right. So this is about CPU, right? So when you talk about CPU, if you observe this diagram is having some connecting lines, right? These connecting lines are called as bus, right? Instruction register hold क्या करेगा? Start hold करेगा. Kalpesh. Instruction register will hold my instruction start. Instruction pointer will hold 9,000. That is the address. उसको कौन से address location पे store किया गया है? Is it fine? Right. Next आया add. Add कहाँ पे है? 9004. तो वो store करे. समझ में आया कल्पेश? Okay. So when I say I'm talking about this diagram, these are the connecting lines which are there. When you talk about connecting lines, they are called as bus. What is bus? It is a simplified way for many devices to communicate with each other. It is the internal arrangement of computer system, which includes maybe design of processor, memory, IO units, etc. It means that when you talk about bus, in that case, internal wiring connectivity via which your devices are connected with each other is called as bus, right? Next, when you talk about control unit, whenever I'm performing any operation, for example, I'm saying I am executing